Hello everyone, Nataro88 here, bringing you another mech build, and this is Kaiser200. Now, Kaiser over here is a unique attempt at building a mech here, since he has a skateboard, which is a unique way of transportation, especially for mechs. So, without any further ado, let's get into him. Okay, so there's Geyser with everything off him. So now we're going to take a look at him from 360-degree angle, spinning him around. You can see there are some ports over at his back, so this one, which are used to store his weapons, which I'll show off later on. Now, spinning him around all the way. You can see he's sort of standard, but unique in some ways. For example, you can see there are some holes here in his hands, in his arms, and that's to accommodate for him to bend his arm at a higher degree. You see that gap? It's allowing this part to move in, which allows him to bend slightly further, which is definitely one plus. Now, this guy's articulation is kind of mixed. He is mainly his articulation is mainly good, but it's limited in some areas due to some design philosophies, which I'll talk about later on. He also has this power generator beam energy thingy up front. I don't know what to really call it. That looks cool. And these pods here on his shoulders I especially like. And one thing that I'm really happy how it turned out is the head of the mech. It's quite nice, and usually all my mech heads are skinny, thin, and empty. Not this one. It's quite large, sort of bulky, but not too bulky, and has a lot of details and design elements, and especially like the visor. And that's about it. It's pretty good. It's my best head to date, I believe so. Now, let's take a look at his legs in more detail. His hip area was sort of unique to work on, especially to try and accommodate an area for an action-based adapter. Oh, and I forgot here. It's just this pin which attaches to his action base and connects to him, which allows him to achieve aerial poses and other sort of poses, which I'll talk about later on. Yeah, and as well as that, his knees are on a unique type of joint that is quite tight to allow him to skate around on his skateboard without falling off. Now, the down part for this tightness is that this joint only allows for a 90-degree bend and not any further, which slightly limits his articulation, which I'll talk about in more detail later on. Now, that's pretty much it for the interesting stuff that I wanted to talk about for this mech. So, let's go ahead and take a look at his accessories. Now, here's a look at all of his accessories, starting off with the most interesting one, of course, the skateboard. Now, it looks plain, basic, but just does the job nicely. It has these two little pegs which plug into his feet, like so. These holes, which allows him to stay on the skateboard quite solidly. Sorry, stand on the skateboard quite solidly. And other than that, nothing too interesting. Let's move on. Next, we have the folding handle sword. It's not really a name, just I have a sword that has a folding handle which folds out, and it folds in for storage, and it's a nicely sized sword. And looking at it next to the mech here, it comes up right at his waist, pretty much. Nothing else too interesting about it. Sort of just a normal sword. And next we have his two mini assault rifles, or beam assault rifles. They are identical, so let's take a look at a single one. Has this nice chrome barrel piece, which makes it look nice. There is this clear cheese slope, which acts as a sight. And other than that, it's quite basic, but I like its small and basic design, and he has no problem holding onto it. And I'll show how he could hold it later on. And he holds his weapons basically the same way that all my other mechs hold their weapons. They all basically share the same hand design, except the first one. That one has different. But that's pretty much it for his accessories. But there's another accessory that I believe I might keep for other mechs, and that is the action base. Just move the things out of the way, and here we are. Let's just get the mech out of the way and clear up some space for the action base, because it deserves some attention. So there's the action base. Doesn't look too unique or too special, but it does do its job perfectly. I'm having trouble adjusting the camera. Okay, so here it is. It's like built on frames, not really for looks, quite basic, and just basically has what it needs. All of these parts are just for holding it in, not for looks. Now the main arm can move up and down, and it's meant to rest on this piece. It can rest in two positions: this straight up position, as well as this downwards position. And that's it. As well as if you pull out this pin, you can see you can adjust the arm. It's actually a separate piece, and this is like a hollow area, so you could plug it in and then get to the height that you'd like. Let's say we like about here. There we are. And that's about it. Nothing else too interesting about it. But it does do its job perfectly. Now, let's take a detailed look at the mech itself. I mean, the mech's articulation. We took a detailed look at it. I'm forgetting what to say. Okay, so let's take a detailed look at the mech's articulation, starting off from the head. Again, really nice head, and I'm really happy with how it worked out. Just move up this stand a bit. So the head is on a ball joint, which allows it to move downwards that far, upwards that far, and side to side, and rotate around. Now, one thing to note: when the weapons are stored, one of the some parts here don't allow for the head to move back much. So when the assault rifles are stored, his head cannot move backwards like that. It just can hold up to here. Although it can move to other ways normally without any issues or limitations. The arms are on ball joints, but they are not on traditional ways. You can see they are quite hindered. And the reason I had to do that was I flipped the ball joint piece to allow the arm to sit there to give more place. You see, this section is longer, which allowed me to leave the arm like so. If I had flipped it out, the other section would have been shorter, and the arm would be much closer and would not fit properly, which in turn did not allow for more rotation. So this is the most pathetic rotation that I have on a mech, just from there to there. It moves out normally and rotates around slightly. We have no bicep rotation, but we have an elbow joint, which bends quite nicely due to that gaping hole in the arm. And then we have the wrist, which is on a T-bar, and the mech's waist separated. Okay, so we have the wrist, which is on a T-bar joint, which allows it to move backwards and forwards, as well as rotate around. And then the fingers can move individually on hinge joints. And this is the clip where the weapons would plug in, which allows them to plug in the weapons securely, but at the same time allow them to be removed easily. Then at the waist we have rotation. That's it, no crunching in the torso. And then we have the hips, which are on ball joints and can move up nicely up to there. If you move it out, it can move farther, but that's it. Then to the back, it can move out to over here, and it can do the splits, just like so. Well, yeah, there you go. Then there's a bit of rotation at the thighs, and the previously shown tight ratchet knee that only bends 90 degrees, which is quite disappointing. Then the ankles on ball joints, which allows them to move forwards nicely. Quite a lot of movement, maybe a little too much movement there. Backwards too, also a lot of movement, probably too much. Sideways, and rotation too. You also get a toe joint, though I find it's quite useless. And one other thing to note, there's a rotation up here in the knee, if you just wanted to do some crazy movements, which you probably don't want to do, but if it's there, the option is there. So that's pretty much it for the articulation of the mech. Now let's put him in a couple of poses and see how great he looks. And there he is in the first pose, trying to pull out his sword. And I say trying because he could never actually pull it off because of his limited shoulder joint, and because he usually falls off too. Sorry about that. He isn't really the steadiest mech in terms of the torso area, so I'll just hold him up. Even though his leg area is quite sturdy, his torso somehow just keeps falling off, even though this connection isn't like, I'd not use this type of connection usually. I usually use it, but somehow this time it ain't working. Bad luck, I guess. Let's put him in another pose. And there he is wielding his sword. Now let's rotate him around. See, I'm quite careful because his sword likes to fall off. So if you would please just don't fall off already, please. You've seen the back multiple times, you don't need to see it again. Really good pose, but I wish that his sword wouldn't fall off all the time. Now let's get him into another pose. And there he is, dual wielding his assault rifles. Because what's cooler than a mech wielding a beam assault rifle? A mech wielding dual beam assault rifles. Now taking a look at him from the side a bit. I'm worried that he might lose his pose, although I'd not try, so he might actually be perfectly fine. Well, just to be safe, because I don't want him falling apart on me. Now, I usually don't complain about my mechs being quite fragile, but I decided to complain about them. Because just to let you know, Lego sometimes is not really the solidest thing ever. Now let's move into some cooler poses that are aerial. And there he is, just soaring through the air with his dual assault rifles, not caring about anybody, taking care of his own business. Just like a cool guy. Rotating him around. Now he's in kind of a quite basic pose, but this is like a really configurable spot. Like you could just rotate his arms like so. Make him aim his gun, move around his legs, all the stuff that you want. But it's all basically based on that pose. As you can see, now we can make him a little more dynamic. And there he is. Much nicer. Much cooler too. And finally, let's get him into his poses that are with the skateboard. He can do this. He can pose with the skateboard while wielding his weapons. But just to make it easier, I'll just put him in poses without his weapons, just to make it easier for myself and to make it more clear for you. And besides, you can clearly imagine how it would be. It's like you've seen the weapons. So now let's put him in his poses. And there he is, standing on his skateboard. Just standing. Nothing really cool about this. Well, but except that the fact the MECH, a futuristic MECH, is using a rudimentary skateboard for transportation. This is like ridiculous. It's so hilarious and ridiculous, I can't believe it. But it's quite cool at the same time. Now, of course, we can get him to be all sporty and articulated and get him into a proper skating pose, which makes him look a little more dynamic, thankfully. So, being boringly standing there. That's really cool. Just rotate him around. Oh, yeah, that's right. Fix this. And this too. And he's looking golden. He looks just like he's an actual skateboarder, which just adds to the coolness factor by a lot. Now, of course, he can do other poses, such as just like, seriously? I see some skateboarders doing this and I don't really get it. And, well, I thought my MECH would be able to do it. Oh, wait a sec. Can he do it? Oh, he might do it. He actually did it. Amazing. Just shows he's just like a real skateboarder. As well as, this frontwards thing that they do too. Although not as much people do this. Just some really funny moves. Now, to the last pose, which is, in my opinion, the coolest pose for this MECH. And the main reason that I built this MECH, really. So, let's get to it. And there he is, in the final pose, and in my opinion, the coolest pose. Now, you might not be able to tell much because of the messy look that he has, because of the low resolution of the camera. But he's actually doing, one of the most iconic skateboarding poses. Or not really poses, moves. When, like, a skateboarder jumps. Obviously, if he jumps, he doesn't need to do this move, since the skateboard is attached to his leg. But real people don't have pegs. They don't have peg holes in their legs, their feet. So they cannot peg them onto their skateboard. But he just does the pose, even though he doesn't really need it to. But of course, he looks sick. So that's what counts, right? So rotating him around, he looks pretty nice. Now, I wish his knees would bend slightly more, because the ankles are like a little too flat up his knees. Like, if his knees were bent slightly more, his ankles wouldn't have to bend this much, and he wouldn't look this ridiculous. Because in some angles, it looks like a mess. But that's about it. Now, that's pretty much it. This video has been going on long enough. It's been like 19 minutes already. So, I think it's time to end it. Thank you for watching, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you really like this video, then don't forget to subscribe and comment down below. You can also follow me on Instagram at the MECH Builder. That is the MECH Builder, where I show other photos of my mechs, some photoshopped, some just normal. So if you're interested, you can check it out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.